Hello, everyone. I wanted to do a short video about AI and dig in a little bit more to some of the nuance. We wrote about this topic a couple of months ago and thought a video would make some sense here. So the first thing I wanted to show briefly is another example of generative AI. So this AI can be used to generate text, images, even video and audio. And I wanted to show an example of this. So I asked one of the leading generative AI image makers to create a painting of Vancouver in the style of Vincent van Gogh. And this is what it came up with in just a handful of seconds. So you can see it's certainly an impressionist style painting. The colors are kind of reminiscent of Van Gogh, I guess. I'm not an art historian by any means. There's certainly a city skyline with the bay in front and the mountains behind. I think it looks pretty good. And again, this is something that didn't exist until I asked the AI tool to help create it. So I think this is a pretty interesting, just another example of one of the things that AI is powerful enough to do. I mentioned AI can also help or can also create audio. And so there are a few tools out there that let you basically create audio in the style of a famous person. And if you have enough of their speeches and enough of a catalog of things that they've said, you can create text that sounds like it was said by that person. So I asked President Obama what he thinks of me. And let's hear what he has to say about me.
Daniel Sitar is a handsome man and a brilliant financial advisor.
Thank you, President Obama. So of course, Mr. Obama didn't say those words, unfortunately, but an AI tool basically helped put my text and make it sound like Mr. Obama, President Obama's voice. So obviously there's some concerns, potential concerns about privacy and security, which we can talk about separately, but it's still a pretty interesting tool to as a way of generating a voice, just like the previous slide generated a picture. So I think a very strong comparison that I might have mentioned before is comparing AI to the internet. So obviously in the late 1990s, there was significant excitement about the potential of this emerging technology known as the internet. And so this led in investment markets to the infamous dot-com bubble. And so prices of some of these telecom and internet hardware and e-commerce companies went absolutely through the roof. And of course, a couple of years later, in the year 2000, this bubble popped and the NASDAQ index, which is a sort of stock market of these mostly high growth companies, declined by nearly 80% in less than 3 years. Now, of course, the internet did end up revolutionizing the world and the economy in ways that people 25 years ago couldn't have even imagined. And so the internet has powered advances such as the iPhone, Google Maps, YouTube, Uber, all sorts of things that in general have made our lives better and more productive. And we think AI can offer some of these similar potential advances. However, from an investment standpoint, when we look back at the top 10 largest technology stocks in 1999, only one of those 10, which was Microsoft, went on to outperform the US stock market over the next 20 years. So even though the technology did eventually, advance and become very powerful, these companies didn't end up being great long-term investments for the most part. A really interesting example of the dot-com bubble is Pets.com. So that's the old logo of Pets.com. And so it was founded in 1998 with this idea of selling pet food and pet supplies over the internet. The stock was briefly very successful after the company went public early in the year 2000. It spent millions of dollars on a Super Bowl commercial that year, which was obviously seen by millions and millions of people. But the problem was the company was losing money on every bag of pet food that it sold. And by the end of 2000, it had declared bankruptcy and disappeared. And so this is a classic example of the hype and silliness of the internet bubble of the period. However, today, Chewy is a profitable billion-dollar company that sells pet food and other pet products over the internet. So it wasn't that Pets.com necessarily had a bad idea. It was just early. The infrastructure wasn't there to allow this type of business to be successful. And so it wasn't successful as a company, but the idea now, 25 years later, actually makes a lot of sense. And there are a number of successful companies that do this. So one tangible example I wanted to show about things that AI is starting to do useful for society sort of in daily life is this interesting example I found from healthcare. So earlier this year in 2023, scientists used AI tools to discover a new antibiotic to fight a deadly bacteria. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Latin name of this bacteria, but it's responsible for drug-resistant infections in settings like hospitals. And scientists at McMaster University in Ontario and MIT trained an AI model and used it to analyze over 6,000 compounds. And in just 90 minutes, the AI model took those 6,000 plus compounds and produced a short list of 240 compounds. And those were then tested in the lab. This led to 9 potential antibiotics, one of which was found to be very successful at killing this particular bacteria. And interestingly, this successful compound was originally supposed to be a potential diabetes drug that didn't end up working out for whatever reason. And so what AI was able to do is take these more than 6,000 potential ideas, compounds that might have been created for all sorts of different purposes, and narrow them down into this sort of shorter list that could then be tested, and eventually a very promising solution was found to this problem. And so this quote from the professor at MIT, this finding further supports the premise that AI can significantly accelerate and expand our search for novel antibiotics. So this is just one way that AI is sort of starting to be useful in a more practical application than just creating interesting pictures and having former presidents say nice things about me. So a couple of implications going forward and conclusions. We do expect that artificial intelligence will lead to significant changes in the world and economy in the years ahead. However, these changes don't happen overnight. They do take, and in some cases, years to become fully apparent. Some of the companies that will benefit from this technology are not obvious right now. So Apple, the best example is Apple using the internet to become the most successful and valuable company in the world. That wasn't obvious back in the late 90s. It took really 10 years after that for the iPhone to be introduced and really start making its mark on the world. So we're cautious to the short-term outlook for many of these leading AI companies, but optimistic on the technology's long-term potential in terms of the economy. So this was a brief sort of 10-minute video with some hopefully meaningful examples and to give you a sense of what AI is currently doing and what it may do in the future. If you come across any interesting examples or articles, please forward them along. I'd love to read new things on this topic. And if you have any questions or comments, of course, please let me know. Thanks very much for watching and take care.